East side, B side, what side are you on?
What's up, Adam?
What's up, Brooke? I'm just doing like the 90s. What's up?
What's up?
Like that
That
was a
was,
cultural touchstone for like years.
it's kind of sad that there are some people that if you say that to them, they will have no idea what you're talking about when that was such a relevant, like you said, cultural phenomenon. Like
It
everybody,
was
even in
everywhere.
like movies, it was like it was such a thing that they were even referencing it in movies of the time.
It was like an inside joke that everybody knew. And then
Mm-hmm.
time happened. And now I've answered the phone like, what's up? They're like, we don't know what's up with you.
Right. What is
Also,
up?
what is up with that voice? And why are you yelling into the phone? That in like the Budweiser frogs.
Bud
By
Wiser.
Zer.
Bud Wiser. Gosh, the
Like
90s
I
had
don't
some good stuff. Let's be
yes,
real.
it was. We had the Macarena, we had the Yo Quiero Taco Bell,
Oh,
which I mean had the unintended consequence of a lot of people buying chihuahuas and trying to
yes.
feed them Taco Bell, and it did not work out.
Do not feed your Chihuahua Taco Bell. It's not good
That's
for
gonna
them.
end it's gonna end badly for everyone
And
involved.
you're going to be cleaning up quite the mess
Yeah.
because, well,
So
dogs eating Taco Bell, not good.
I mean, I love Taco Bell, but it does have an effect on your system. It's just the truth.
Oh man. So of course the last time we talked they still had not found the submersible and then it was revealed that it imploded, which is very terrifying. Um it's
I,
just
I, I do want to just like reference last week when I said that these people were probably not okay the moment they lost contact,
mhm.
and that appears to be what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll just add deep sea scientist to my resume.
Fortunately though, it appears that from what they say it would have happened so fast that they
Like
would not have known.
instantaneous. Yeah.
I did see this
I
video
mean,
on TikTok and apparently it was uploaded from one of the crew. It was minutes as they were getting in and the thing was being locked. They had to take their shoes off. I didn't even think about that. They're sitting in their stocking feet. Their shoes are like off to the side because I guess trying to get as comfortable as possible sitting on the floor of this thing. And then you see them start to go underwater and they're like giving the divers outside of the submersible the okay thumbs up okay symbol saying that they're cool. And then the boss, the CEO, he's like, hey, what are you steering this thing with again? And then he shows this like Logitech controller, and it's all very surreal because this is literally moments. These are their literal last moments, and somehow they're on TikTok.
that blows me away. I guess I have not seen that, but it sounds super legit. So that's disturbing.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if he took this video and then immediately uploaded it, or it just uploaded itself to the cloud and someone's gotten a hold of it. I don't know, but it's
Yeah,
just
that's crazy.
whoa.
I mean, and then you juxtapose that with the fact that we had like 350 migrants on a boat in the Mediterranean who
Mm-hmm.
drowned, but we sent no one to check for them.
Yeah, that
We
was on
spent
Twitter.
like we spent a ton of time searching for these five, four billionaires and billionaires offspring in the Arctic Ocean when we pretty much all knew it was very unlikely that they were going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if we sent just one of those ships, the Mediterranean,
Mm-hmm.
or if any of the countries that have military ships in the Mediterranean already
Yeah.
had sent anybody over to help the migrants, then maybe 300 people wouldn't have drowned. And I
Yeah.
don't know, I'm bad at math historically, but I do know that 300 is a lot more than five.
It is. It is. It is. It is. So there's that part of it that, like, of course, everybody has just, and you don't want to speak ill of the deceased, but, people are trashing the design of the submersible and they're
I mean, to be
trashing.
fair, they were trashing the design of the submersible before it went under.
Oh, well, that's true too. So,
So
so
that,
that, I mean, there's that, and then you've got people talking about people with money will just do anything, and then you've got the people talking about the fact that people with money they're trying to rescue them, even though they already really knew their fate, but yet these other 300 people, nobody did anything.
yeah.
So,
Well, and how many times, whether it's not just the Mediterranean with those refugees, like there's an entire history of boats trying to escape, Caribbean countries, whether it's, Cuba or whatnot, where they're just like, well, we can't help them until they get to shore. Like if the boat sinks halfway in national waters, nothing we can do. Sorry. I was like, really? Like
yeah.
let's be less sucky.
Yeah, exactly. Can we not be complete and total a-holes? Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like let's figure it out.
Okay,
But
this did not become a podcast about submersibles and politics and things like that, but it's been everywhere. We
yeah.
have to acknowledge it. You have to talk about it.
And I feel
Um
like we're not saying anything that hasn't been out there in public discourse. There have been a lot of questions that this event has
Highlighted.
highlighted or made people have discussions about. And if they're, I mean, God forbid, I do not wish to die in a tiny submersible. But if the time that my passing does come, it causes people to ask questions about how we do things as society, then that is not a death in vain, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Last week I told you about a show that I thought you should absolutely watch, and I finished it. It's called Jury
Yes, the
Duty.
jury duty.
And I stand by that 100%. It's 8 episodes. And then I mean, it's not a giveaway because we already know that everybody's an actor, but he finds out everybody's an actor, and that episode is the last one. It's so good. It's just so good.
And I have been on vacation at the lake and have not watched anything in the
Not even
last
your
week.
old
So
standbys?
not even any of my old standbys.
What?
I have barely watched TV in the last 7 days, which is super weird and disconcerting. But
Wow.
I will be home tomorrow and I'll probably turn all three TVs on immediately. So I can recap. But even with all of that, I was able to find an A side for this week. Which the one thing
Oh,
that I do love about being at the lake is going out on the boat every day, and every night must end with a bonfire, weather permitted. Um, I also am ridiculously burnt. Hubris, thy name is Adam. When you go out on the boat in the middle of the afternoon, do not decide to not put on any sunscreen and take your shirt off. And I
well, that
look like a
wasn't
cartoon
very
character.
you
I
know.
look like, well, usually I don't burn real well. Like I historically have not, I've never peeled. Like I still haven't peeled from this one, but I am very, very bright pink red in a lot of places. Um, so I learned,
Aloe.
yeah, the thing is, like, it doesn't really hurt.
Oh, well, that's good.
Like I feel fine. Like I
Mhm.
slept okay last night. I mean, it's just visually, it is a very clearly that I've been out in the sun. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
but
Well,
I was able to find a topic. So
at
thank
least
goodness
you
for that.
and you were outside, which is very good for you.
Yeah, no, I've spent a lot of time outside in the last couple of days. It's been really good. The I was never somebody who had the opportunity to go to the lake on the weekends in the summer as a kid because we didn't have a place to go, and my parents spent a lot of time planning and saving for retirement and did a really good job of it, so they were able to retire to a place that allows this opportunity. But I totally get it now why kids would be like, "Oh man," on Friday they'd be like, "Oh, we got to go up to the lake this weekend," and they're like kind of like annoyed. And then
Mhm.
on Monday, they're like, "No, it was the greatest experience ever." Like, yeah, you just got to get there, and then you're out in the sun and the water, and like it's just a different vibe. So I understand completely why people have historically wanted to live by water because every time I'm by water, I'm better.
They say that there's just something about like being by the water or the beach or something that just mentally
Mhm.
is so good for you.
I don't know if it's just like the waves crashing on the shore, if it's the sound of the water, if it's the like you get up in the morning. Like I hate mornings, but I love mornings at the lake, so I can get out and like watch the sun come across the lake. I'm sure. I guess if I lived here every day, that would probably get old after a while, like anything does. Like I'm sure there are people in Hawaii who are like, "Oh yeah, it's paradise. Let's go to a luau."
I
But
was actually, it's funny that you say that because I was actually talking to a friend at work, and she said she like visited a friend that lives literally on the beach. Like you go out the back door and you're right there, the sand, the beach, the water. And she was like, "Oh, let's go out to the beach." And he's like, I haven't used that door in like 3 years because his dog doesn't like the sand. So he never
yeah,
goes out like to the beach, like, and he lives right there.
yeah. Well, you find ways that like everything becomes boring after a while. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess if you jump out of planes all the time, but by the last time you jump out of a plane, you're like, whatever. It
Yeah.
appears, it looks like the ground is coming out to me very quickly. Oh, I got a parachute.
Whereas the first person to do it with you was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And you're like, "Meh,
Yeah, yeah.
meh."
You're like now it's just
So this week we are talking about a story that just kind of re-hit the news due to the fact that it involves a minor. So initially, the names and photos of minors cannot be released,
mhm,
but this is kind of come back out in the news after it happened last year because finally, photos of um, the person involved, that is the minor, and her family and her name have been released. So this
okay.
week we are talking about Emma Brown. Emma Brown apparently, um I should say, her father also almost the victim of patricide. So Emma is 12 years old, and she had somehow decided to make a pact with another child, another girl that was 12 years old. Now, before this pact was made, Emma seemingly was a typical 12-year-old girl. And they live in Poolville, Texas. And they had like recently gone to a father-daughter dance at Peaster Elementary where she was a student. She had, pets, cats, dogs, there's pets. She did a lot of activities with her father. One of those activities is in a photo that was just released where it's Texas, where dad was showing Emma how to use weapons. Daniel Brown, he's 38 years old. He actually has an FFL license, which means that he is allowed to not only buy but sell weapons out of his house.
So what does FFL stand for?
It's a federal firearms license, which is provided by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms.
Oh, so
So,
it's like even more than just state. It's like
yeah, so
federal
it's a
government.
big
Okay.
deal. So, it allows an individual or a company to sell, manufacture, import firearms and ammunition.
So not easy to get.
So, I'm sure there's many steps you have to go through I would hope there's many steps that you would have to go through to be able to get this license.
Mm,
Emma Brown, again, she's 12-year-old schoolgirl. And like schoolgirls do, she's on the socials and she meets another 12-year-old who, due to laws, cannot be named.
mm,
Emma and this 12-year-old, they form a friendship. They talk, via Snapchat, via Instagram, whatever. And they somehow form a bond. And in this bond, they decide that they are both going to make a pact to kill their families and to run away. So on September 20th of 2022, Emma walks into her father's bedroom, shoots her father. But the plan was not just to kill her father, it was to kill her father, her mother, the entire family, along
yeah.
with the pets. It was supposed to be a total wipeout. So she
Jeez.
goes into her father's bedroom. Um, it appears at the time like dad was getting ready for bed. She goes into the father's bedroom. She shoots the dad. She goes outside, and unfortunately, she puts the gun to her head, shoots herself, falls over in the driveway.
Goodness.
So a call is made to 911. And of course, they arrive on scene. And as emergency workers are like in the house, you can hear one of the emergency workers say, "The daughter just shot him in the master bedroom." And then there's a silence, and then you hear them say nothing. So it was understood that like everybody's getting ready for bed.
Mm,
So outside, Emma is found laying in the dirt road with a handgun underneath her body.
Hmm.
Both Emma and dad Daniel are rushed to the hospital. Daniel actually recovers from his gunshot
Oh,
wounds and is released from the hospital. Unfortunately, 2 days later after the shooting, Emma does not survive.
no. I mean, I would assume a direct shot to the head is a different thing than a potential like mid-body shot.
Yeah. So, of course, upon investigation, police find out about this plan with the other 12-year-old in Lufkin, Texas. She was going to pick up her friend in Lufkin, Texas, and then the two were going to drive 230 miles to Georgia.
This is two 12-year-olds. We're going to drive to Georgia.
Two 12-year-olds were planning to drive to Georgia. She was going to drive to Lufkin, Texas, pick up her friend, and they were going to drive to Georgia.
Wow.
Now, even though the Parker County District Attorney's Office has confirmed that there is a second girl, she's not been identified, but she was charged with conspiracy to commit murder.
But she didn't shoot her parents.
She did not, but
Oof.
they were able to, through the investigation, find like old Snapchat messages or Instagram messages about their plans. So she was charged with conspiracy to commit murder because she was conspiring to kill her family, commit murder.
Pretty much the definition of that crime.
Yeah. Again, upon investigation, they find out what the plan was, but there is no official motive for why these two were planning to kill their families and to drive off to Georgia. Now, I did find one article in airportsindia.org.in that says that this allegedly was due to abuse, like horrific abuse that Emma suffered at the hands of her father, Daniel. But I have not been able to substantiate that with any other article. But this Airports India said that she was constantly being abused physically and emotionally at the hands of her father, and that was the motive for this. And maybe that was the bond that she had with this other child that was maybe possibly allegedly being abused,
Yeah.
but we don't know. Again, I couldn't find any other article to corroborate that story. It was just that one article. Everybody else is saying we don't really know the motive.
Yeah, and it's not like there's been mentioned by the authorities in any case or any local stories at all.
Right, right. And as you would expect, Daniel, the father, Leah, the mom, not really talking to anybody about what's happened. They've actually installed a security fence with a no trespassing sign on their property. They put this up shortly after the tragedy. So we don't really have the motive officially yet. The Torrent County Medical Examiner's Office did perform an autopsy on Emma, and they did rule the cause and manner of death as suicide by gunshot wound to the head. You know, it's just, I don't want to get into the whole like debate about guns and like accessibility and things like that, but
Mm-hmm.
the Lufkin communications director, her name is Jessica Pebsworth. She says, it doesn't matter if they're in a small town or a big town, things like this can unfortunately happen. She says, I will say that this case is definitely a time to remind parents that it's very important to know who your children are friends with, whether it's in the classroom, social media apps like Snapchat, TikTok, and also gaming platforms.
Mm-hmm.
I
Your
would
your
add,
your Twitch, your Xbox Live, all those.
is it also a good idea that your 12-year-old has access to your weapons? I mean, the argument can be made, oh, well, if somebody had broken into the house and she needed to defend herself, but also she didn't need to defend herself and
Yeah,
something tragic happened. So there's also that argument like,
it's a lot of
are we
responsibility to throw on a child to know where the
it
weapons are, and the idea of the statistically is someone going to break in the house more likely, or is someone potentially use this inappropriately more likely?
right? So are we giving too much access to people with weapons? And I understand he had his federal firearms license, this FFL, but that doesn't mean that everybody else in the family should have had access, maybe.
Right. And I mean, I'll be honest, it's probably good that I didn't have access to a lot of things when I was 12 years old.
Right? I mean, when you're 12, you're not really thinking clearly at all. It's funny, at every stage of life, I think we feel like we know it all. Well, not now. Like I am, I think, old enough and mature enough to say I don't know everything. But when you're younger, I think you feel like
I'd like to pretend that I'm old enough and mature enough to say that, but I still say it. I still think I know everything. Like I'm just gonna be honest, because there are people listening here who would call me on it immediately if I pretended that I was like, no, I don't think I know everything. They'd be like, really? Here's the receipts, buddy.
I just, you do at every stage of life. You're like, I feel like I know everything, but you really
Yeah,
don't, especially at 12 or 13 or 20.
yeah.
You're
20,
still,
25,
yeah,
42,
you're still learning. You're still growing.
71. Like everybody's still learning. Like there's
Like
still
you're
stuff we got to be
always still
reminded
learning.
of. Yeah, and
Everybody's still learning every day.
and it's easy for any of us to fall into bad habits where we think we know everything and don't need anybody to educate us. And then you're like, well, maybe I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's done learning, no matter what age.
But that is the like I said, that just popped back up like within the last day because the photos of Emma were finally and her name were finally released, even though this is a case that happened last year. But due to like, laws about minors and things like that, it took
Yeah,
some time. So that is why we discussed that for the B-side this week. That's the tragic story of Emma and her family.
I will say that like one of the more surprising moments in this that the other 12-year-old was actually a other 12-year-old.
You know what? That's a very valid point, especially being someone that was a friend online.
Yeah, I thought we were going into like oh, this is turns out that it's not, it's not really a 12-year-old, but the fact that no, this was just another 12-year-old. They were like exchanging like strangers on the train, like murder fantasies, and things went badly.
Things went very, very badly. And
Yeah,
she's been charged with conspiracy to murder. She's been, she's going to be doing some time. Um,
yeah,
and, it's like you're 12 and now the rest of your life is going to be marred by the fact that when you were 12, you did this really dumb thing that cost somebody their life.
and I'm sure at the time it felt like we're just talking, we're just playing with ideas. It doesn't seem real, but you never know how someone else is going to take it. I mean, that's the beauty of the Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith, which is an incredibly powerful book and a very good play, where it talks about when you talk to somebody about somebody, you don't know that how they're going to take
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying. You may be saying something in jest or think that they're saying something in jest, but you don't know what their meaning behind it, and it can cause a whole lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Just there's just so many things to take from this. Again, you know, do know who your kids are talking to. Do check
Yeah.
their phones. I mean, when mine were younger, I was in their phones all the time. Who are you texting? They weren't allowed to have social media until they were a certain age, but like with text messages and stuff, I was like, who are you texting? I want to see. Like, and if I saw something that I thought was a red flag, I was going to ask them about it because you know what? I paid the phone bill. It was my phone. I let you use it.
And I would say like the the challenge for so many of us parents is that what we think is social media isn't even social media.
Mm-hmm.
Like you may think, oh, I got to ask about TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and there's probably two new formats that you don't even know about. So it's not just like ask about the things you know about. Like, know what apps are on your kids' phones. I mean, just
Yeah.
from a privacy standpoint, but there are apps that are social media apps that will take the rest of us grown-ups 6 months to a year to figure out exist, that kids are already getting bored.
Yeah. Like that Be Real app. I know a lot of people like that. I don't. And then, you have no idea because you have to send it in the moment within, a certain amount of time. And it has to be like that actual second. So who knows what your kids are seeing at that moment?
Yeah, or who they're sharing their location and activity.
Yeah.
Because you can add just random people on your Be Real. You think that you would be only adding your friends, but then somebody wants to request you, and they've got three of your friends. You're like, okay, and now you got a person that you don't know that is seeing pictures of your live location
Mm-hmm.
and activity, that can be scary.
And let me tell you, there are some people, like, this has become a TikTok trend for some people. They're like, I bet you can't find my location. And they'll go on your profile and they'll take a video and they will down to the street
Mhm.
tell you where you are. Like, and they do this to prove how easy it is, but like, and they're doing it with your consent. But if they can do that, imagine what someone else can do and you
Yeah.
don't know.
And people can figure stuff out using the internet. Just what's in your background, like, be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. So just you have to be so careful. You have to, even as an adult, you have to be so careful. Because as an adult, they can still find your background, find out where you are. So
Hmm.
just be careful with
We
social
we've
media.
all known people that have gone through the whole. We met somebody online and then didn't go well, and then that person just kept popping back up in ways that really shouldn't be able to find me, but they do.
Yeah. So it's a
So
word of warning for everybody, especially for kids. Know who your kids are talking to. Maybe, check, don't make
maybe,
things so accessible for them.
yeah, and monitor their phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't
That-
don't don't leave the weapons around for them to find so easily. Monitor their phone. And
yeah. And
yeah.
now that we've thoroughly made everyone uncomfortable and scared about both social media apps and access to weapons, time for the A side.
My bad, my bad.
No, it's good. It's necessary. It's necessary talk. All right. So as we pivot away from the politics and parenting talk, which we could do an entire like spin-off
Politics
podcast.
and parenting talk. That's our
Politics,
spinoff.
parenting, and like we'd have to do something fun though. It'd be like politics, parenting, and potatoes. And it'd be
Of
like, here's the
pastries.
thing about yeah, or pastries. Here's the thing about politics. Here's a parenting tip, and then here's our favorite pastry that we eat to hide our feelings about all these other things. The Three Ps podcast coming soon.
Oh man.
But while we're in development of that new podcast, we still have this one. And luckily, as I mentioned, I am at the lake this week visiting family. I get to see my brother and sister in law out here at the lake, and a bunch of extended family. The street that we all live on now, and the lake, and getting out every day for sunburns on the boat, and lots of bonfires. And I got gas station sushi from Quick Trip,
Oh
which I
my.
was
How are you
very
feeling
excited
after
about.
that?
I haven't tried it yet. It's actually like when we're done here, I'm gonna go have some spicy crab roll.
Okay.
So
I'll text you
I think
later,
it'll be
see how
fun.
you're feeling.
Yeah, I'll be fine. I'm sure if there's no podcast next week, it is not an incrimination of Quick Trip sushi because it looks really good, and it was only $3.99. So,
Oh, cool.
but one of the things that I was worried about is like I'm up here. I've been trying to be outside a lot. I've had friends visiting. Visiting family. I haven't spent a lot of time in front of screens, and my phone's a little concerned. Like even I think I got my update on Sunday. They were like, your screen usage the last week is down like 75%. Are you okay? Would you like
Right.
to talk?
We miss you.
We miss you. And I'm like, but the fun part is that when you sit with family, whether it's at dinner or lunch or breakfast or, cruising around on the boat or sitting by the bonfire, you start to reminisce and talk about the past and things that you remember. And this week's A side is born completely out of that environment where we were sitting by the bonfire a couple nights ago and talking about books that we read as kids.
Mhm.
Because my mom is a retired second grade teacher, so still has a lot of the books that she accumulated over 40 years in the classroom upstairs in the loft. And there's like a futon, and there's a bunch of books that you can sit and read. And
Are you
books that
sitting
I
there reading The
remember,
Very Hungry Caterpillar?
I will neither confirm nor deny. I might have decided that my next tattoo is going to be Mike Mulligan and the Steam Shovel, but we'll see. But as we're talking about all of these old books and books that we read as kids and how they impacted us, a book series that I had not thought of in probably 30 years came to mind. And as we're talking about it, the thing that always struck me about this book series is how seemingly absurd it was that we would allow kids in school to read this. My parents encouraged me to read it. I read, I think, all 19 of the original authors' stories in this franchise. There are now 160 and still going. But the original book, which came out in, it was originally written in 1924 and was published by Rand McNally. Yes, the same company that would go on to be just the giant maps, the atlases that we would buy.
Hmm.
So kids, before phones had maps on them, we had to buy maps. And I would always get the Atlas map, which was this giant, like large format thing you could have in your car. You could see like the whole state, and then you'd get to like the East Coast states where like they would have separate pages just for the cities, which was always really impressive because I was like, hey, most states are just on one map on one page,
Right.
which is
It was
like
really
2 feet.
cool to like get to the city that actually had its own map. You're like, man, this
Yeah,
is
you're like,
cool.
oh, I gotta flip to the back. It was like choose your own adventure. Like now skip
Yeah.
to page 25. It was a lot of fun. But in 1924, Rand McNally was publishing books as well and children's books. And they published a book by Gertrude C. Warner that was called The Boxcar Children. And the
Mm.
Boxcar Children, and this is the thing that's always blown me away, that we allowed children to read it and then we encouraged children to read it, was it's basically an entire book about how kids don't need adults.
Hmm. Hmm.
These four Alden children, their parents pass away and they're orphaned, and they decide to create a home for themselves in an abandoned boxcar in the woods. And I remember reading this as a child and being like, oh, yeah, legit, I could do that if need be. Totally. I remember like at my brother and I were 3 years apart, and we had two cousins who were about the same age. I was a little bit older than Rachel, and Andrew was a little bit younger than Laura, or they were the same age. But when we would all hang out at Grandma and Grandpa's house, or even when they came to visit us in Minnesota, and we are like in the early grade school years, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, we're downstairs and we're playing Boxcar Children. And it was like we all live in this boxcar, but like, oh, you're the oldest. You gotta go find a job and get some food and like bring it back. And the rest of us will be here like learning how to knit and creating soup out of potatoes and stones.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in hindsight, I'm like,
Like you do.
this is a dangerous thing to encourage children. But also, it's not like when I read Swiss Family Robinson, I immediately like went and got a shipwreck. You know, it was like Mike Mulligan and the steam shovel. I didn't decide to build a basement with a giant steam shovel because it was there.
Well, you didn't
The
read
Very
Lord of the
Hungry Caterpillar.
Flies and then try to go live on some, abandoned island with, you know,
True. I did, however, after I read Lord of the Flies, decide that Lord of the Flies is just an allegory for being on the bus,
okay.
because any bus trip with just children and one bus driver who's doing their best to also keep everyone safe driving, but also kind of be the only voice of authority over 40 children.
Hmm.
That is Lord of the Flies on wheels, and it terrifies
Okay.
me. So I would rather go to a forbidden like Caribbean island than get on a bus with 40 children.
I'm not going to say I disagree with you. After going
It's
to the
very
zoo
scary.
recently and like seeing kids, and I'm like, are kids always like this? I don't remember this.
So Boxcar Children was mildly successful in its original iteration. It came out in 1924, but it did not really gain a lot of cultural notoriety until a shorter version was revised and produced in 1942. And that's when it started to take off. And the beauty of the series is that as we're all standing around the fire, we've got two, three generations of people who have all read these books. Like
Hmm.
my father remembered reading them when he was in grade school in the like late 50s, early 60s. I remember reading them when I was in grade school in the late earlys or late 80s, early 90s. I know that they are still going, which kind of blew me away that they have 160 new or total novels at this point after Gertrude Warner, Gertrude Chandler Warner, or Gertrude C. Warner, as she's been uh, listed as the author of both of those name variations, wrote the first 19 books, which is quite
Wow.
frankly amazing. 19 books for the early 40s and 50s is a lot of books.
Hmm.
But then that they have taken on a life of their own. For the last, she stopped writing in the late 70s, and for the last 40 something years, other authors have jumped in. And the thing that sticks out to me the most is that the original book was about these children trying to survive and finding their way in life without adults, and then eventually finding out that their grandfather, who they thought was cruel and mean, is actually just really nice and searching for them for the whole time. And now he brings the boxcar to live on the land so they can live in the house with, and they can still have the boxcar to play it. So very nightly, big bow,
Thanks for
tied up,
spoiling that
everything's good.
one.
Oh yeah, spoiler alert for a book that is 98 years old. My bad. What is kind of interesting is that after that, they were like, Gertrude evidently was like, I want to keep writing about these kids, but we've already solved their major, life problems. They've moved back in with grandpa. They're living on a nice estate. They, seem to have their lives back together. So what are what are we gonna have, like, kill grandpa and then have them do this all over again?
Hmm.
Luckily, she did not do that.
Hmm.
They pivot after the second book, and all of the books since, all the way up to issue like 160. They basically become the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and Encyclopedia Brown all rolled into one. It's a family of detectives and crime fighters in a way, and so they were constantly figuring out new mysteries and moving on. They don't really age in the novels. So of the first 19 that Warner wrote, they age a little bit,
Hmm.
but certainly not in the, because it spans 50 years when she wrote Boxcar Children in 1924, then reissued in 1942, and then her last novel was in 1976. So it wasn't she was writing you know middle-aged Boxcar Children.
Right.
They aged very slowly, but every story since then, so there was a gap between 1976 and 1991. They picked up the series again. All of them have been kind of trapped in time for the children of their age, but each of the majority of the later written books are set in the modern era where they have been written. So whether
Okay.
they're written in the 90s, the 2000s, or even like the most recent one, the most recent, now there's 162, because this is new information that I have just found.
Like
There are
literally, you just
162.
realized this.
Literally, I thought there were 160, but I now, on this website, they show two more that have come out. One this year, in fact, called the
Oh,
Code Breaking.
okay.
So all of them have updated the time and place, but kept the kids the same age,
Mm.
which kind of feels almost like James Bond in that way, where like all the movies about James Bond doesn't really age, but
Hmm.
like all of his gadgets and the threats to world peace kind of adapt to the year and time that the movie is being made.
Right. Right.
So there is the unexpected correlation between James Bond and the Boxcar Children. One thing that I am excited about that I did not know existed, that I found out when we were sitting by the fire the other night and talking about how it was so weird that this is a book that we all know. This is a series that we all know. And yet Hollywood, which is notorious for remaking movies and taking books and turning them into series and movies, has never really made a Boxcar Children movie. Part of that might be that if it was going to happen, it should have happened in like the 1950s and 60s, because now it's just probably not going to be something that flies. Like, these children were orphaned and now they live in a boxcar. You'd
Right.
have to update it a lot if you made it a modern story.
Right.
But I did find out that there was a 2014 movie called The Boxcar Children that was an animated movie. Some of the notable voices in the animated movie were Martin Sheen, who plays the grandfather,
Okay.
DB Baker, or DB Sweeney, who plays Baker, J.K. Simmons, who most people would know as J. Jonah Jameson from the Spider-Man movies, plays
Or
the kindly doctor, which
or you
is
might remember him from um Oz.
Oz, or what was the movie about drumming?
Drumline?
No, like it was him and the guy I don't like who was in Top Gun. Um, you know, he's got a very punchable face. He was also in the really bad version of Fantastic Four that came out most recently. He's in like a Coke commercial. Hold on, I'll find you.
Whiplash.
Whiplash was the movie, and it also starred
Miles
guy
Teller.
who Miles Teller, who, let's be honest, has a punchable face. Not that I would ever punch him, but it's just one of those guys you're like, oh, I don't know if I like that guy. And then you throw a mustache on it, and you're like, no, I really don't like it. But maybe that's just me projecting. But J.K. Simmons, who in both of those roles, in whether it's J. Jonas Jameson, he's in Oz or Whiplash, you would not expect him to play the voice of the kindly doctor
Right?
in the Boxcar Children. But yeah, came out in 2014, and in classic Adam fashion, you can only rent it for $3.99
Come
on
on,
Apple.
Adam.
You can't find it anywhere else. But
But it's on
I
Apple, at
will.
least Apple. It's not some weird one that you like to find these like weird Fubo or
Well, yeah, it's available for free on something called Hoopla,
okay.
but I don't know what Hoopla is, so I try your own risk because it sounds made up. But I can tell you this: if you have a public library or a half price books in your town, either of those two locations are sure to have a copy of the Boxcar Children. And if you have not read it in a long time, or if you have kids in the grades 2 to 6 age that you kind of wish they were more independent and might think about running away from home because they could do it on their own, this is a great how-to guide. So you can give them the chance to read that, and then they'll be like, yeah, but also it sounds really awful because they talk about having to hunt for food and like beg for food and find leftover food that they. So I think in any way, maybe it was a book that just told me that running away was going to be a lot more complicated than I expected.
It
So
is.
maybe that's why schools and parents have encouraged it for the last almost 100 years
Oh, you think you
to
can do
read.
this on your own? Go for it, kid.
Yeah, it was like here's a how-to guide, and then kids are like, "What's a boxcar?" It's like, already, kid, you're behind. You know, clearly the preeminent place to live if you are an orphan running away from society and trying to make it. So, the Flight of Fancy that was the bonfire talk two nights ago turned into the A side. The Boxcar Children, which has 160 different novels. I've only read 19. And if I win the lottery, which is something I'm saying a lot lately because I'd like that, that'd be fun.
Hmm.
I may spend maybe a month just reading Boxcar Children books and maybe doing that live on Twitch or something. Kind of doing like the anti-Twitch, like everyone else is playing video games,
Right.
and I'm
You're
just
doing
reading a
something
book in silence.
educational. Hmm.
I'm just reading a book in silence.
Oh, you wouldn't even read it out loud. You just read it.
No, I would just like flip pages. You know, I think there's a following there.
You know what? There's a following for everything.
For everything. So I got my backup plan for the future when my lottery money runs out. And that very strange segue was the A side. But check out the Boxcar Children if you've never read it, and if you can find Hoopla, you'll get the movie for free. And if not, you can find it on Apple TV.
All right. I was about to make a smart comment to you and then I forgot. Oh man. Doggone
Oh,
it, Adam.
I'm the worst.
All right. Well, that's the A side.
That is the A side.
Well, you know the shtick, Adam.
Yes, check out our website, A-Side, B-Side podcast.square.site. On that, you can find all of our relevant links and information and sources. If you want to watch that Boxcar Children movie on Hoopla, you're interested about Hoopla, then you can find a link to it there. And God help you with your computer, because I don't know if that's going to give you any spyware or not, but at your own risk, because it's never a thing I've
Don't
heard
say
of.
we didn't warn you.
We tried to warn you. Also, sorry for ruining the book that's been out for 99 years. You can also follow us on all of the social medias. You will have links to all of the major streaming services. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher, and that is still your main way to listen to us, but you have accounts on those other networks, it is a super easy and super awesome thing for you to do to subscribe to us on those networks. It costs you nothing and gives us a little bit more cachet. So if you like us and you like the format you're getting us in, that's great. But feel free to like us and subscribe to us on other networks because it will help us continue to provide such engrossing
Such
and entertaining content.
engaging and informational.
Yes, I mean we've covered a lot, and we'll let you can only find out more details about when politics, parenting, and potatoes
Pastries.
comes out. Oh, I'm sorry, pastries. So it's
You know
politics.
what? Potatoes might be better. You can do so much with potatoes. You
I
can
think we
mash
could do both.
them,
We
fry them.
do politics, parenting, pastries, and potatoes.
All right, I'm here for it.
It's the 4 Ps.
All right.
People are like, "What's that about?" Like, I don't know. You gotta listen. But you can check that out. You can also donate to Brooke, who does all of our editing, by buying her a coffee at buyusacoffee.com. You can see all of our merchandise on there. You can buy some of it if you wish. That would be super cool. Our coffee mugs are very good at holding coffee. And also you
And
can
other
use them as a
liquids.
weapon in, well, yeah, any liquid really.
Mhm.
But you use them in home self-defense because they have a handle. So if you're like, I gotta lock my guns up, but I need something to keep the home safe, coffee mugs are always a good idea.
The handle, you can use that to throw it as your aim.
Yeah, it definitely helps with aim. It also, like, if you're holding the handle and you use the mug as a defense mechanism, you're just gonna left with the handle. You're not gonna hurt your knuckles. But if you try
True.
to punch, now you're gonna hurt your knuckles. So that's why I try to start and end all of my fights with the coffee.
Okay. All right. Good logical thinking there.
Yeah, so now it's gonna be politics, parenting, potatoes, pastries, and pugilistics.
Oh man. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, bro.